make to interrupt you before I forget. There are reports na maraming nakakalusot dyan sa airport mismo na identified as yung iba nagbabayad para makalukso. So, ang nagdadala ng laro dyan is the Bureau of Quarantine. So, I think the director is sa mga quarantine dito.
Si Dr. Salvador.
Mr. President, we have Dr. Ferdy Salcedo on the head of Bureau of Quarantine and Dr. Odette Salvador of the same. If they can be recognized, Mr. President.
Saan siya?
Good evening, Mr. President, Director Salcedo po here. Regarding that issue, sir, the Bureau of Quarantine has investigated the staff of Bureau of Quarantine, and we have not seen that case, sir, among the staff of Bureau of Quarantine.
So, you investigated these reports. These reports obviously
Yes,
dumating na rin sa opisina mo.
Opo, sir. Yes, President.
And what is the progress of your investigation?
We have not seen any case like this, sir, that the BOQ staff are involved into this kind of irregularities, Mr. President.
Yeah, maraming report na kasi dito nakakalusot. So, anyway, you can conduct a report, and that will be independent of other. I will touch sa Secretary of Justice, ng NBI na lang siya.
Mr. President, I have already discussed the matter with the NBI OIC chief this morning, and the DOJ has instructed the NBI to conduct a thorough investigation of these incidents, maybe starting all the way from the arrival area of in our international airports, all the way to the quarantine hotels, and even to the home quarantine, Mr. President.
Alam mo, hindi mahirap for a person who was an eye in that kind of situation. NBI na lang. Paano mo lang, sundin mo lang yung camera, makikita mo naman eh. Then you can understand by, the body language. Pati kung may na mag-report ng ipasa ko na sa iyo yung NBI na sa Bureau of Investigation.
Meron na pong department order addressed to the NBI,
Already.
Mr. President. Yes,
That's
we
good.
issued it this morning, Mr. President.
Thank you. Alam mo, mga kababayan, may cellphone man kayo, huwag ninyong tawagan yung pag may alam kayo. Kasi it gets messy later on. Maimbestiga gaya ni Chua. You put yourself in a bind, actually. Kung mahuli ka, masundan yung camera eh. Ang body language. Makikita doon na I'm sure these things are very clear to them. Then, can we hear now Secretary Lorenzana?
Mayor. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, colleagues.
Yes, sir.
Bayan, magandang gabi. Hindi pa ako nakadalo dyan, Mayor, dahil na-expose ako sa positive na COVID. 4 na tao sa bahay namin ang positive. Anyway, Mr. President, here are the activities of the armed forces. Take up the activities to support or to help the devastated areas by the typhoon. There are 7,493 soldiers deployed. Ito po yung nakadeploy ng mga sundalo natin sa regions 4B, 6, 7, 10, at 13. Next slide, please. Next slide. Ito naman po yung mga assets natin na naka-deploy din. 769 land transport, yung mga 6x6, 28 na air, C-130, C-295 at saka helicopters, at saka 27 naval assets sa mga barko. Ang mission po naman ito ay to support the transportation requirements of those who are making the relief operations. Kasama na rito yung mga relief goods na galing sa Interim Sea, DSWD, DOH, DICT personnel, sa iba pa. Next slide, please. Next slide. Ito naman po yung mga may likas na lang mga tao, matransport mga tao, o individuals, yung ating Philippine Air Force, at saka 300,000 kilograms of supplies na kanilang transport. Next slide. Ang mga Philippine Navy ay nakapag-transport ng 1,225 na tao at 3 milyong kilograms o kilos na supplies ang kanilang i-transport from other places, especially in Manila, going to Cebu, Bacolod, Bohol, and Siargao and Surigao. The Philippine Army were able to transport 12 truckloads of relief goods transported to Surigao and 9 truckloads of relief goods sent to Leyte. Next. Ito yung ating mga assets na na-neutralize natin, yung Navy, yung malaking barko natin na nagtala ng mga bigas, at saka kung ano-ano pa mga kagamitan para sa relief operations. Next slide. Next slide. Ito naman yung mga assets natin, yung helicopters natin, yung Black Hawk helicopters ay nagamit ng gusto ngayon sa relief operations. Next. Ito yung mga 6x6 natin at saka, 6x6 natin at saka yun. Pakibalik. Ito, Mr. President, yung ating mga sasakyan trucks na nagdala ng mga relief goods sa mga stricken areas. Kasama na rin dito yung mga engineering equipments natin na nag-clear ng debris sa mga kalsada. Ito po, patuloy na next slide. Last slide. Last slide. Ito po, Mr. President, patuloy na suporta at tutulong ang AFP sa recovery and rehabilitation phase ng affected communities. Ilan po, maraming salamat po, Mr. President.
Thank you, Secretary Lorenzana. Meron pa akong may dagdag. Yes,
Mr. President, Secretary Duque.
may dagdag ka po. Go ahead. I can see you. Go ahead, I can see you.
Yes, sir. Secretary Duque here. I just want to respectfully remind Mr. President, there's another presentation coming from one of our experts, Dr. Edsel Salvania. He was invited to present and clarify a certain issue with regard to the use of a COVID-19 novel real-time PCR diagnostic test. It's a short presentation. He was requested by the Office of the President to make this clarification, Mr. President. May I ask the TV recognize Dr. Edsel Salvania, Mr. President.
So, Salvania, okay. We'd be happy to hear you.
Good evening, Mr. President. Good evening to the members of the Cabinet and my fellow advisors. Can we have the first slide? This will be a brief discussion. So there is this thing that's going around po na medyo na-confused kasi yung CDC daw nag-withdraw ng RT-PCR, and they're saying that the RT-PCRs are no longer valid. This is fake news po, Mr. President. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. So, yung withdraw po ng CDC is just one brand of test po. Yung brand of test that they produce. And sinabi naman po nila, they're retiring that test not because it falsely detects influenza or any other virus, but because they are focusing on other tests po. Wala pong kinalaman yung ibang klaseng RT-PCR dito, and this only refers to one very specific test po. Next slide, please. And it did not fail. This test was not unreliable. The only reason they're removing it is because they have better tests na po, and they have other tests that they want to focus on. Next slide, please. And so the confusion po kasi was that they have a new test that can also detect influenza aside from COVID po. Pero it doesn't, yung old test po nila is really just for COVID, and it does not become positive if there is the flu. Yun lang po kasi yung confusion point doon. Hindi po totoo that the influenza will give you a positive COVID test. That is fake news po. Next slide, please. And so, ang sabi rin po ng CDC, all the other tests that are on the market that are already FDA approved remain valid. And even the test that they withdrew is still valid. It does not become positive because of influenza. It only becomes positive if there is COVID po. So all the RT-PCR tests remain valid, and there is no truth to the rumor that influenza will cause a positive COVID test po. Next slide. So there is actually a layman version of this. Yung USA Today po, they did a fact check. The CDC is withdrawing its PCR COVID-19 test, but this is not because it confuses viruses. Next slide, please. And ito po yung sinabi nila, they are pointing to a particular article na medyo na-mix up po niya yung the claim. The claim is that CDC withdraws use of PCR test, admits it can distinguish between flu and COVID-19. This is false po. This was a misinterpretation by one newspaper. Next slide, please. So, ang nangyari po is, as has been shown, they removed the test because they're replacing it with a different test. And it does not invalidate any PCR tests po for COVID-19. Next slide, please. So it does not confuse COVID-19 and the flu. Our tests na RT-PCR po are very specific for COVID. There are tests that can test for both COVID and the flu, but a COVID will not make a positive flu test, and the flu will not make a positive COVID test po. They are separate. And they do what they are designed to do. So nonsense po yung sinabi nung article na yon ng Gateway Pundit, which is they misunderstood the CDC announcement po. Hindi po talaga pwedeng mag-positive ang COVID test sa influenza because it does not have the correct genetic material to make the test positive po. Next slide, please. So the statement of USA Today is fake news po talaga, na yung CDC withdrew the use of the PCR test because it had problems distinguishing between flu and COVID. It's withdrawing the test because there are already a lot of other tests available, and it's upgrading its own test po. Next slide. So in summary, yung RT-PCR po, lahat po ng RT-PCR natin for COVID, it remains the gold standard for COVID diagnosis. The flu will not cause a false positive COVID-19 RT-PCR, and CDC is just withdrawing one brand of test. And it's not because it's useless, it's because it wants to replace it with another test, and also there are other tests on the market. And even that test that they're withdrawing, it still works against COVID. So all FDA-cleared kits remain valid for COVID-19 diagnosis, and we can be assured po that our RT-PCRs are reliable, and they will not confuse COVID with the flu. Thank you, Mr. President.
Salamat po. The time to really call for we have to eat. And for the guys in the panel, you are uh, invited to go home. Kung tapos naman, kasi mag-discuss lang sila, kami-kami na lang dito. Because mawala kayo, because may mga slides din sila. But if you want to just sit there and stare, and you look at each other, maybe it will brighten our day for us. We are facing with people who are concerned with the problems of humanity. Thank you very much. I owe you one. Kung may kalaban kayo, lalo na drugista, tawagan mo ako. At yung pulis na soil, yan, ayaw ko rin yan. It breaks the, I don't know, but these are the kind of police. I cannot understand why they should be violating the law. Sa Davao, I do not allow police to drink liquor and in public. Baski hindi na kayo uniforme. Sabi ko, doon na lang kayo sa bahay ninyo mag-inuman. Not in public. Pangit tignan kasi kilala yung mga pulis. Tapos nandyan yung buti, nakapatong na yung beer na yung naubos. Ay, nako. That's bad. So, kaya parang mababait ng pulis ko sa Davao. Discipline. It's not because they're afraid of him, but they are disciplined. Maybe initially noon, but along the way, they have developed this paradigm of how to serve the people. Yun lang ho. Salamat at magkain muna kami. But if you are nearby and you want to partake of simple lang na pagkain, so one ulam and one rice and soup. Sarap dito. Oo. Bong note mo nga sila bong I think that I can invite you for dinner one of these days. Tayo ba would constitute the prohibited crowd? Hindi naman siguro. Malaking, ito malaki man to. Magkain tayo. I will give you a opportunity to taste what isang ulam lang talaga, isang kanin pati sabaw. That's it. Walang steak dito kay magalit yung tao. Pera nila kinakain. So, hanggang dyan lang ako. Pero, we'll take i-screenshot mo mo. One time we'll have dinner here in my office dito. Malaki mang building dito. Gonna eat here or the other. Yun, medyo carpeted yun. Sa taas nito. Mamili lang kayo kung anong gusto niya. Maybe you can, I'll give you a tour of before I go because baka you never know who will win. Then we would be deprived again to see how our money is being put to operation here in this people. Kaya inimita ko kayo na magbisita dito and I will give you personally a tour. Pero ako, hindi pa ako nakatulog dito at hindi ko pa napasyalan dahil. Even had, matatapos na lang ako yung museum, I do not know where, hindi pa rin ako napunta. Pero doon sa museum na yon, nandoon yung tatay ko pati ako. Kasi naging cabinet member ang tatay ko sa panahon ni first term ni President Marcos. He was a Secretary of General Services. Wala na yun siguro ngayon. But that was his cabinet post. Kaya sabi nila yung mukha daw dyan, nandyan yung tatay ko, pati ako. Pero sa bagay, buhay pa man ako, sabi ko, kung ako ilagay sa museum, ng buang, baka matuloy ang sige ho, maraming salamat sa inyo. Ma'am,
This is GTV DW.